Hello, everyone. It's Doug Rogers. It's December 7th.
This is Russell Rogers. We're the Rogers team with Keller Williams Southwick. Let's talk DFW real estate. So, Doug, we've had some good deals lately, and I think it's time to brag on some of our sellers.
Yeah, I thought we'd talk about how relationships with real estate agents and their buyers and sellers work out, and how if a good coach and a good player come together, you have great results. And it's like any analogy, whenever you have two people working together, if somebody listens to the one who has the experience and then they go out and execute the plan, you get great results. So let's start with Rockwall.
Yeah, so I just closed on that deal, and these are some stellar sellers that I've had. This is our third deal together. They knocked the first two out of the park. It was a listing and then a purchase of a new build, and now they're selling this one. And when they sold the first listing, it looked like a staged house. You know, walking in, that's what the realtor would have thought, is that someone's already staged this. You know, why am I showing up now, you know, after it's been staged? But, I mean, she did the whole thing. It looked like a spa in the bathroom, the whole 9 yards. So this house is a little bigger, hard to do that, kind of filling every room, but it was the same idea. Make things look really nice. We walked through every room. They asked questions, and they did basically everything, right? Get everything looking nice and simplified and cleaned up perfectly. And then they just executed along the way, like you said. You know, anytime a point of contention came up, we got on the phone, we talked about it, and then they went and actually did what we were talking about. And so obviously it was their decision on everything, but you know, based on our discussion and based on good information. So great job to them. And we sold for 99% of list price. We'll even talk about how theirs compared to some in the neighborhood, and they just really knocked it out of the park.
Well, I understand. Staging is a really interesting question about how does that work and what really happens. The bottom line is there are people in this industry who have a vision for photography. Staging is really about getting ready for the photographer to show up, putting things in the right place and having it just right. So when the photography's done and the virtual tours are done, the house looks great. The house I just listed and sold in Las Colinas, the stager gave them a dozen ideas, and the house looked good to begin with, but they took it to the next level. They spent about $800 on little staging items and things that they could use to enhance the look of the house. And so one difference between, for example, a for sale by owner or a minimum effort broker who just says, I'm going to charge you $500 and throw your house in MLS and then we'll take some pictures with an iPhone. Just think of the difference if a professional stager walks through your house, puts things in the right place. And this particular seller put everything in the right place. It looked like a model home right out of Southern Living. And when people saw the house, they just said, this is perfect. Now, I always use this analogy from a Forrest Gump movie. He used this line toward the end where they had made a lot of money, and he said, well, that's just one less thing. Well, when buyers look at a house and they see that it's immaculate and it's clean and there's no need to fix anything, it's one less thing in their mind. All they're now thinking about is sales price. And so those sellers took the objections of placement, of how the condition of this house might work, out of the equation. And so we always just talked about with buyers, and we had 8 offers on that house, sold it way above list price. So the only thing we really were talking about is sales price and closing date.
Yeah, and on ours too, we got the professional photography, and it's in Sonoma Verde there in McLennan Chisholm. I say Rockwall, it's not technically, but generally speaking. And it has a lot of amenities, and they have like this big house and this oversized lot. So we got the aerial photography and everything. And I bring all that up because as we compare to other listings in the neighborhood, and now these are Zillow statistics, we're going to talk about how Zillow's not always accurate, but I think the views and the saves on Zillow do have some potential value. Our views were like in the thousands, and our saves were like, last time I checked, it was like 50. And then after that, I stopped looking because we were already under contract. But the house down the street, the exact same street, was a fifth of that. And they, again, had been listed for, you know, three months longer. And so I think that just shows, to your point, it looks so good that all those people clicking online, I think eventually led to a sale. So I don't know if we sold to a Zillow person, but, you know, it did have the potential where we were getting so many more eyes and getting thought about so much more that photography really paid off.
Well, let's go to the next level of conversation between buyers and sellers with realtors, and that's price. If you get the price right, that's half the battle. When you talk about Zillow, I wanted to double check something just for fun so we could have this conversation. I have a rental property in Grapevine. It's worth about 375 to 385. It's on the tax records for 350. It's not in great shape. It's a good house, but it's not meant with new countertops and new cabinets. It doesn't have a swimming pool. It probably needs a little bit of work. And if you go on Zillow, it's 450,000. If you go on Redfin, it's 441,000. And I know as a real estate agent, if someone offered me 400,000, I would take it so fast because it's really only worth about 375 to 380. So now, as a for sale by owner or someone who's really not doing their homework or really keen on understanding the marketplace, if you put your house on the market for 450 off of Redfin or off of Zillow, you're in trouble. So let's start with talking about a real estate agent's relationship with the seller and really boiling it down to the right price, because the guys that we sold the house for on Rochelle in Las Colinas, we all agreed on the price. We all thought the price was right where we wanted it to be, and we still got above list price.
Yeah, I have one thing to add too on Zillow. So I saw a funny thing on Twitter. It said Zillow put the Z in accuracy. So obviously there's not a Z in accuracy. So.
Well, but ask yourself this question: why are they overpricing something? Well, they want you to pick up the phone and call them. Oh, we can sell your house for way above list price. Now sign this agreement where we have you locked in as our client for 6 months. Now we've overpromised you by $50,000, but all those other folks didn't promise you the extra 50,000. So they overpromise and underdeliver. And now you're stuck with them for 6 months unless they have some sort of backout clause or you take the house off the market. But there's nothing worse than putting your house on the market overpriced in a struggling marketplace, and now you're on the market 6 months. Now guess what? You're not getting 98% of list price. The buyer who has half a brain is going to look at that and say, well, if obviously the other people didn't buy it at this price, so I'm not going to buy it at that price either. So the offers come in accordingly. So a seller and a good agent having that conversation as to what the true value is worth its weight in gold.
Yeah, and that's what I did on this Rockwall deal too, is I looked at the houses in the neighborhood that were listed because they were still contemplating it. Do we do it now? School's about to end or start. Is this a good time or do we wait till the spring? These are kind of our plans. We'd rather do now, but let's talk about it. What could we get today? And I sent them a list, and it was all the 8 houses in their neighborhood. And I said, essentially all the houses that haven't sold yet are overpriced, and many of those houses have not come down and they still aren't sold. So they've come onto market and sold and closed in the same time those houses have just sat there. And again, most of it's price. These are new build houses. There's nothing wrong with them besides the price. So for them to still be sitting this long, it's essentially the only reason, other than if there's some weird smell in there or something I don't know about. But to your point, they listened. I told them a number. It was $525. That's what we listed at, and we sold for $523 with no other concessions. So kind of points out, if you actually do your homework legitimately, you can sell your house while others just sit there indefinitely.
All right, well, let's flip around and talk about buyers working and listening to their agents. The same thing can be true about developing an accurate price, but also you have to be prepared to get a lot of other details correct. I've got a good story for you in regards to a friend of mine that bought a house many years ago, and he was in the oil and gas business, and he was going to buy this for sale by owner because he knows how to buy a house. And so he went to this for sale by owner, and they got this contract off the internet, and he bought the house, got the appraisal ordered, and guess what? Didn't appraise. And so it appraised way under what he had purchased it for. And so I actually went with him and set in a conversation with a lawyer. And the lawyer looked at him and said, you're in the oil and gas business, right? So yeah, you sign leases and contracts all the time, right? Right. So, well, you signed a contract that doesn't have any provision about the appraisal. So you have no out. I can't stand in front of a judge and says this business professional who reads contracts every day, who signs leases every day, didn't read this contract, didn't understand it. So he should be giving a get out of jail free card. He should know better. So one value that we bring with a lot of buyers is understanding the right price, the right timing, how long it's been on the market, and making a good offer. I sold a house this summer for $1.7 million, and we negotiated on that house for at least $60,000, $70,000. And the buyer kept saying, "Are you sure? Are you sure that we shouldn't be offering full price?" I said, "No. Based on the comparable sales, based on the time of the market, we're going to get $50,000 off this list price." And the buyer said, "Okay, if you think that's the right thing to do." And guess what? They're putting up the Christmas lights at that house right now.
Yeah, and it's so great that we have the conform contracts that we do, because as agents, these are promulgated by the state of Texas, and Basically, and I saw this in the Air Force as well. Anytime an airman in the Air Force does something crazy, they add a new rule, right? So this is basically a contract that's been written over time that every time they have like a weird lawsuit that fell through the cracks, they add language to protect both sides, typically the consumer, the buyer, in that situation. So we have these contracts to use, and I think it doesn't go far enough to like talk about how if you're buying a FISBO and just getting some contract off LegalZoom to buy a house, that's like such a scary thing to me. I would never even do that, even as a realtor. Like I wouldn't even as a buyer look at those contracts and try to buy a house like that. I would make sure I use the state of Texas contract.
Yeah, we're really blessed, and the state of Texas has figured it out, and the rest of the nation has always been following suit as to how Texas handles its contracts. I got to spend some time with David Fair, who's an attorney who was on the attorney board that wrote countless paragraphs that are in our contracts today. And the state of Texas takes the approach that they're going to protect the consumer from brokers, from builders, from sellers, and unscrupulous lenders. And so everything in the contract is designed to protect buyers and sellers. Probably a little more so on the buyer side, but it does have a consumer protection attitude when written into the contract. And every single detail that could go wrong in a real estate transaction is covered in our contracts. So there is a lot of value in having an agent that understands the 23 paragraphs and the 11 pages that we have to go through. So having an agent that's on your side that has a state of Texas contract as a buyer, that value there protects you from all the legalities and the pitfalls that can take place in a real estate transaction.
Yeah, it really provides some good guardrails, right? Just those things you mentioned, and so it can just make the deal so much easier, so much smoother with a lot of less legal issues. But I think you had a good story recently about a story you heard from a third party about even when they did have a realtor, they didn't listen to them, and it didn't turn out that great.
Well, a friend of mine, we were playing golf the other day, and he said, "Well, I've got this." I had a listing appointment here on the golf course community we were in, and engineer who was going to sell his house himself didn't need a realtor because it's not that hard, and he was going to get $750,000 for his house, and it's going to sell in 3 or 4 days. It's no big deal. And my friend just shook his head and he was thinking, I'm sorry, but your house isn't even worth $650. You're talking at least $100,000 too high. And so they had a parting of the ways, and that was a couple of months ago so far as when he met him the first time. And guess what? House is still there, still for sale. And that house, every day that goes by, the guy's losing money because he's making a payment on a house that he could have sold if he had the price right.
Yeah, Nori and I actually have a rule about this. So there's a lot of things in life you can do yourself, right? But there's a rule in our house. Russell doesn't do plumbing and Russell doesn't do electrical. Now I can do little small parts in the toilet, the little assembly in the back. She'll let me do that, but I don't get access to real plumbing, and I don't get access to real electrical because the catastrophic effects of getting those two things wrong are not worth me saving a few $100s or a few $1,000s from one of those experts. Yep. And so if I'm trying to just change a switch in my electrical panel, I can save $300 probably. But what happens if I get it wrong? I burn down the house, I electrocute myself badly, we have to go to an ambulance, whatever the case is, right? And so that's to save $300. Now I know deals can be a lot bigger, but it's also a much bigger part of your net worth. These are large assets. And so to not use professionals seems really crazy to me. And, the catastrophic effects of not using an agent, like in that case, now they're sitting on the market. If they'd been under contract to buy, they might have lost that contingency. Now they can't buy their dream home, or it sits for a long time, or there's other things that can happen that, just giving it a shot without an agent could be a really bad idea.
Well, you bring up a point that's worth noting. When you hire a really good agent who's been in the marketplace for a long time, we have a plumber, we have an electrician, we have a carpenter, I have a yard guy. I have a roof guy. I have an inspector. I have a photographer. I have a stager. I have multiple trades that owe me a favor, and they know when I call that they're going to get paid, and it's going to be a good job. And so they do a good job. And so the inspector that I can the inspectors, plural, I can recommend are better than someone that you can get out of a phone book because you don't have any knowledge of who they are. The lenders we work with, there's just this long list of vendors who are more energetic and more tied to an experienced agent, knowing that their livelihood depends on doing a great job versus somebody that's a for sale by owner out of the phone book. Say, it's just a one-shot deal. I don't have to do a good job. If I don't do a good job, they're not calling me back anyway.
Yeah, and I'll wrap it up with this too, and then we'll get to the numbers for this week. But, Nori and I just went to our appointment for the baby coming soon, and they're always telling us in these classes, like, basically plan for things to not go the way you think, right? Like, it's the baby's birth, not yours. That's kind of like their new thing to teach it, and that's kind of a good point. And I feel like selling and buying real estate is like that as well. There's almost always something that comes up, even if it's minor. So even that Rockwall deal, everything went very well, and then the day of closing, the mobile notary of all people, who their job is to get documents signed and upload them and send them in, right? Well, they missed 2 documents to get signed by the buyers, not my side, the other side, but it's in another state, so it's kind of a whole weird deal. They missed 2 documents, and then they didn't know how to upload those documents, and it actually delayed the wire transfer of funds, although we did finally close at like 8:30 p.m. And so even with all competent parties, that one person kind of messed it up, but I had that title person working the whole time. They said, we're not going to leave until we get this thing closed, although the wire won't go out till Monday. And so it's kind of to that point, even if you think everything's going to go right and you do have all these competent parties, something almost always comes up, and you want an advisor that's competent like us to be there for you when that happens.
Yep. Got to be there and have people who trust you and you can count on. So let's talk a little bit about what's going on in the marketplace right now. A couple of interesting things. The number of listings coming in is starting to grow a little bit here and there. Not everywhere, but let's say in the Alliance area, they added 39 listings this week. The week before, they only added 21 listings. But they sold a few, and the total listings inventory right now in the Alliance area is down to 418. Previously, it was at 428. In the Grapevine, Colleyville, Keller, Southlake area, they added only 13 listings in the last week. That's a small number. We really should be closer to 20 on that. However, they did reduce the inventory by 26, so the total number of houses for sale in those cities is only 270. Flower Mound, Capel, Highland Village added 26 listings. That's good for them. That's actually double what we've seen the last 2 weeks before. So they did actually have a nice bump in new listings in Flower Mound, Capel, Highland Village, and they had 13 go under contract. But ironically, they have the same exact number of listings today as they did a week ago. In the Frisco, Plano area, they added 69 listings. That's a little bit more than normal. They've been adding 40-ish each week, 40 to 50, but 69 is a nice bump up. 62 went under contract, but they sold a bunch. They've got a bunch under contract and went under closing to 6, so their total number of listings currently is 607. So a lot of interesting things happening out there. But I did do a little extra homework and noticed that right now, if you have a house for sale, it's probably going to be on the market in each of these locations somewhere between 30 and 45 days on the market. Houses farther out, Denison, Sherman, Weatherford, Denton, Mansfield, those marketplaces are averaging somewhere between 50 and 70 days on the market. So homes closer to the airport, 30 to 45 days. Getting farther out, starting to slow down a little bit.
Yeah, especially when the sellers don't do a good job, right?
If they don't listen to the realtor, they're not going to sell. So thank you all for listening.
Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.